Greetings to all. I, Animesh Upadhyay, am back with another episode of Off the Desk by the Law Culture. In this episode, we'll be discussing about collective bargaining in new labor laws. To discuss on the same, we have with us Mr. Anshul Prakash sir. Anshul sir is a partner at Khaitan and Co. and heads the employment, labor and benefits practice of the firm from its Mumbai office. Anshul and the ELB practice under his leadership have won several awards and recognitions over the years, being ranked tier 1 across league tables, including ALB Client Service Excellence Award, and most recently, Anshul has been recognized by BW Legal World among top 40 under 40 finest lawyers and legal eagles of the Indian legal ecosystems. Anshul exclusively advises several prominent domestic and international clients on full suite of contentious and non-contentious employment law and related matters concerning workforce management, social security, industrial relations, workplace harassment and discrimination, structuring benefits and incentives, health and safety, internal inquiries, workforce restructuring, white collar investigations. Anshul also leads the firm's thought leadership initiative on advocacy and knowledge share in employment and labor law space, and actively shares insights on evolving jurisprudence in the employment and labor law space in several industry publications, print media, and public speaking events organized by industry bodies. More recently, Anshul and ELB practice group at Khaitan and Co. actively engaged both publicly and with focus groups to appraise the industry on the lockdown regulations and their implications and assisted clients to navigate and manage their workplace during the lockdown initiated by the government to contain the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. Sir, it's an honor to have you with us, and we are extremely thankful that you spared time from your extremely busy schedule.
No, so I think it's an absolute pleasure, Animesh, and uh, having an opportunity of this nature is always giving us the, I think, right forum to interact with all the budding lawyers, and I think it's my privilege to be a part of, this initiative. And
Yes,
thank you so much for organizing this.
yes, sir.
And I don't think any hectic schedule should really take away the opportunity which we have to probably some knowledge and share some perspective with you all, because I think labor law as a topic, first of all, is supposed to be one of the driest topics
Yes,
which you can have from a law school student perspective. But yes, I think over a period of time, what I have realized is that there's a lot of potential in this particular domain and field, and it is important for all of us to also appreciate the fact that the moment you pass out from the law school, there are nuances involved, whether you are a corporate lawyer or whether you are an independent practitioner or even an accommodation. A specific fundamental knowledge on this front is equally important. So I think with that premise, we can proceed. We have, I think, half an hour
yes, sir.
to go, and I'll be as succinct as possible in my responses to your questions. Please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, sir. Sir, the first question would be like the definition of settlement under the Industrial Relations Code now includes individual settlements, which goes against the very concept of collective bargaining. What are your views on that, sir?
See, I think we need to take a very nuanced approach. The very perspective of an individual settlement is not the case that it never existed under the current regime. It's a very simple thing. If you have to look at it from the perspective of trade union movement in India, we also need to balance it by saying that not every individual, and especially when we are dividing the nuances into the services sector, IT industry, manufacturing sector, not everybody may have the privilege of approaching a trade union every time to have his grievances or disputes redressed. Of course, collective bargaining is always a mechanism when we are talking about a large workforce or substantial number of personnel or individuals coming together and putting up a front to mitigate or address any grievances or raise disputes. But I think what is important for us to understand is that individual settlements have always been there. It just gives more leeway, I think, in more certain terms to the industry to recognize the fact that it's not just about people coming in together and approaching you, is also an individual who can arrive at a settlement with you as an employer. So it is more of a, I would say a balanced, nuanced regime, which we will be looking at, as opposed to anomalies which industry largely had and even employees had in the past about their status on an individual basis for raising disputes before the management.
Correct, sir. So, the new Industrial Relations Code in relation to termination of individual worker in its definition of industrial dispute now includes discharge, dismissal, retrenchment, and termination of the services of an individual worker as well. This individual autonomy or individual settlement attracts too much of skepticism with respect to the roles of internal industrial politics, which sometimes deliberately mutes the victim voices. So, in these of cases, will that be really helpful?
So I think if I've understood the question correctly, and maybe my two thoughts over there, discharge, dismissal, retrenchment um, as the topic for uh, being considered as an industrial dispute has always been there, because I think that is the industrial dispute which generally arises. If you look at from the perspective of a labor authority, a labor commissioner's office, or if the matter proceeds before the labor court or industrial tribunal, it's a very clear perspective that discharge, dismissal, and retrenchment have been a part of the dispute mechanism or dispute adjudication process for, I think, years now. And I will not be commenting from an internal politics standpoint, but I think legal position has been very clear. Probably nuances have been added under the proposed regime, that you will have a grievance redressal committee, which is going to also look into those grievances, probably look at possible settlements. And of course, if you very clearly, the legislative intent is also not there to forego the requirements of intervention by the judiciary or the competent labor authority. They are just trying to instill some more confidence from an industrial relations standpoint to have opportunity into internal mechanisms while dealing with these kind of disputes. But I think it has always been there. There is nothing so new or recent about it when it comes to the proposed industrial relations regime.
Correct, sir. So, the Industrial Relations Code places the power to negotiate with a statutorily recognized union or a negotiating council. However, the recognized union or negotiating council will only have the right to negotiate with the employer on such matters as may be prescribed. Now, don't you think that this will dilute the concept of collective bargaining?
I think I will just pause over there, and probably, we need to go back in time and look at it, from the perspective of how the regime, the labor law regime has been, and whether it is the constitutional scheme or the judicial perspective or even the executive viewpoint on industrial relations. We are looking at, and we have been always experiencing a protectionist regime, something which is more inclined towards the interest of the workers. And the very moment we see something as may be prescribed, it is not going to have an absolute diluting effect. I think if you are looking at the rules, if you are looking at what the government is going to eventually prescribe, I don't think the intention of the legislature or the executive would be to do away with anything. For example, whether it is discharge, conditions of service, wages, the like. Essentially, the point which I'm trying to make is that all the subject matters, all the items which have so far been considered as part of the collective bargaining mechanism from a management and union viewpoint will continue to exist. It's just that the very negotiation points on which the employer and the unions can really negotiate are going to be again provided in a more bespoke fashion. So I don't think we need to really look at it from the dilution standpoint. The position will or is likely to remain the same. The intent of the legislature is to simplify, not dilute the employees already had from their perspective in terms of raising any industrial disputes or negotiating on any points, something which is very fundamental to their very existence within the industrial relations organization's standpoint, keeping in view the extent laws and what is proposed under the industrial relations code. I hope I'm clear on that front.
Correct, sir. So, please tell us more about the rights and liabilities of contractual workers. As with the new industrial code, the permanent and ad hoc workers are kept nearly on the same pedestal.
No, I think it may not be completely correct to say that permanent and ad hoc workers are placed on the same pedestal. Yes, the labor laws as these currently exist do mention that if one is engaging an employee on a fixed term basis, uh, as opposed to a permanent basis, such fixed term employees must be extended the same statutory benefits that are available to permanent employees, of course, on a prorated basis, depending on the period of service rendered by them. However, this right has been conferred on fixed term employees and not contract workers. Now, let me be very clear. From an industry perspective, there is a lot of to and fro discussions and anomalies which have been experienced as to who will be a contract worker, who will be a fixed term worker or ad hoc worker. But I'm very clear on this front that we don't have to really get confused. The concept of a contract worker, a contract labor, if I have to add there, is different, as it covers those workers with whom an entity does not have an employer-employee relationship per se. These are workers who are engaged by an entity which will be perceived and determined as a principal employer through a third-party agency or a contractor, which in fact has an employer-employee relationship with such workers. So if we are using the term contract worker, probably we need to be clear if we are looking at a fixed term contract employee or a worker, or we are looking at a contract worker who essentially is an outsourced personnel engaged through a third party manpower services provider or a third party contractor, who in turn under a services agreement is going to deploy such individuals on the premises of the principal employer for certain remuneration and service charges. So it's not that the contract workers immediately will get a right to claim something against the principal employer. Of course, if there is any anomaly, any shortfall, default, the contract workers are vested with the rights, obligations, just like as any other worker who is working for establishment, because in this case, for a contract worker, it will be the contractor who will be the immediate employer. And if the immediate employer fails to pay them wages, they can recover the dues from the principal employer only by following the mechanism where they can approach the labor authority. Labor authority is going to seek the necessary explanation from the contractor, the immediate employer. And if the immediate employer has failed to do so or make the requisite kind of payment of wages or even social security, and I'm not getting into the nuances of registrations and all those compliances, but at least on the face of it, it's not that the contract workers will have an immediate say or claim against the principal employer. The authority will be vested with the requisite power to determine whether the liability in terms of any shortfall or default, specifically from a wage perspective, can be put forth on the principal employer. And in fact, this protection will, it exists under the existing also.
Okay, so your views on the consolidation of 47 central and nearly 200 state labor laws into four exhaustive codes introduced by the Government of India.
Okay, I think two, three aspects. One is consolidation, another one is substitution, another one is replacement. So there are two, three terms which have been floating around, and I'd like to clarify that labor codes, as these are proposed, the four consolidated labor codes would replace and substitute only 29 labor laws. All these laws are central legislations. It's not that the laws which are proposed, and the roadmap says, believe from 1st of April 2021, depending on how the rules are also going to be framed, we need to be very clear in our mind that not all the 47 central legislations are going to be substituted or replaced. So there are laws which will exist. You have to really watch out for any kind of specialist viewpoint we need to take from other existing laws. But just to be very clear, the parliament does not carry the power to immediately repeal the laws which have already been enacted by the state governments. So, as I mentioned to you, from a labor code standpoint, it's not going to be the case that the 200 state legislations, or I would say regulations, are immediately going to be repealed. Of course, the process is going on of consultation with the states to reconcile any kind of conflict which may be there on the substantive laws as far as the codes and existing state statutes are concerned. But that's something which will be more on the procedural part as we see the implementation really being put forth by the government at the center as well as for the states. But coming to my views on the labor codes, I would only say that these codes do a better job in consolidating the existing laws than reforming them. I mean, of course, there are some very interesting points which have been raised, but the good thing for a practicing lawyer is to review or look at only these four principal legislations as opposed to looking at multiplicity of laws all across. And of course, for people like you, students like you, who will be stepping into the domain of being a practicing lawyer, perhaps it will be easier for you. For us, it will be largely the way we have been looking at laws in the past, several bearers before us. Probably things will be easier. Of course, there will be interpretation elements, but that's where we are. As I mentioned, some aspects of the codes are noteworthy. For instance, the codes state that in the event the authority fails to register any establishment within the stipulated time frame from a compliance standpoint, for example, under the OSH code, it will be deemed that the establishment is registered. I mean, of course, we'll have to see how much, in essence, this is eventually going to be recognized and implemented by the authorities on ground. But that's what we see, at least from a facilitation standpoint. And if implemented well, of course, needless to mention, this is going to have a positive impact on the ease of commencing business in India, which is, of course, an area where India perhaps may have a long way to go in the international domain. And similarly, the substitution of Inspector Raj with facilitation process, where an employer would be rendered or accorded an opportunity to rectify any non-compliances. That also brings out a very positive change in the approach of the government, as opposed to the one which the authorities on ground had about harassing the industry. Sometimes an inspector would go on ground, seek records. So at least from the Inspector Raj, we are moving towards a facilitation sort of a situation. But of course, this is more of a practical nuance. We have to see how far the mindset is going to change once the labor codes are in force.
Sir, lastly, our message to our viewers, which majorly comprises of young law students and members of legal fraternity.
I think I can only say read the course thoroughly with interest. Probably I'm not saying you just undo what you have already studied, especially people who are in the probably the final year or fourth year, etc. Because labor laws as a subject generally, in at least in my experience from my law school days, it was something which was taught in 2 or 3 stars, and by now probably you have already learned something. But try not to undo everything which you have learned. Of course, look at it from a fresh perspective, but don't rely on the news articles. Please don't use internet as a tool to enhance your knowledge on the labor codes. There are nuances. There have been several statements made by the government, several statements which have been made by the industry. But I think what is important for us to appreciate as lawyers or future lawyers is to see any nuance which the law as it is proposed today would bring to the table for you. Don't rely on the statements in the media. Don't rely on social media posts. Don't try to look at or bring yourself in the line of panic, which probably sometimes have been created as to how labor codes are going to be viewed in the future. And of course, at my firm, the way I and my team have been looking at, we have been interacting with the government on all these labor codes. We have been a part of even the drafting process on several occasions. And we have been making representations to the officials on several fronts. So to the extent we need any assistance from you as people who are really involved in the process of reading up the law, probably we can always factor in your expert inputs in terms of identifying any uncertainties or unclear provisions which you may have while you read up the law. So that's something which I can really look at because I'm still learning, Animesh. Nobody can really claim that somebody is an expert. You are called an expert, but one should never think that he becomes an expert of any domain. So it's a continuous learning process for me. And in fact, today's discussion also has brought in the learning curve on a more upfront basis in a personal capacity. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Animesh.
Thanks a lot for such an insightful session, sir. And it's an honor to interact with you. And thanks a lot, sir.
All the best to all of you who are watching this. And in case there is anything you need to discuss, I know labor law sometimes can be very boring, but it's a subject matter of interest currently. So always happy to assist. I and my team are always available to continue working together with you all, budding lawyers.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.